What's unique about working in Africa from a U.S. perspective, from the U.S. private sector perspective, is actually the bipartisan approach to trade and investment on the continent that we've seen over the last sort of decade emerge. Really, I think the restart in U.S.-Africa relations really started in around 2014, thereabouts, when you had the first African Leadership Summit. We saw continuity through the first Trump administration, actually, where you saw the creation of initiatives like Prosper Africa, where you saw the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation actually double in terms of its investment capability and capacity. You also saw a renewed commitment to the Export-Import Bank of the United States and other key agencies that are core to the U.S.-Africa partnership. I think we saw continued continuity under the Biden administration with the PAC-DBIA, the Presidential Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa, continued into that administration, which is the council that we serve. We serve as the chair of the Digital and ICT subcommittee for that body. So I think we'll see more of the same. I think if you think about what's key and what's important to both sides of the aisle with respect to foreign policy, it's promoting increased U.S. trade partnerships around the world, building ties, particularly with areas where you have critical security of supply of key industrial commodities, and I think that you'll see that continuity regardless of who wins on November 5th.
So then, you know, Franklin, many people are talking about the potential Trump trade that we're seeing in markets right now. But even putting that aside, there's a lot of potential for political uncertainty. I mean, from where you sit, how do you prepare for that? That could potentially come if we don't get an outright outcome on November 5th.
It's a big issue, and I think partners to the U.S. are, I think, concerned and perhaps rightly so nervous about what it means for policy continuity, depending on who wins the election and who prevails. I think specifically with respect to Africa, you've actually got a unique opportunity because both sides are very concerned about China, very concerned about U.S. sort of over-reliance on Chinese trade and supply chains, and looking for opportunities to relocate supply chains to friendlier jurisdictions. And I think to the sensibilities of both of the leading candidates, Africa could represent an interesting opportunity for friendshoring. This is a term meaning moving production capacity and supply chains to markets and geographies that are seen to have a more favorable disposition to the U.S. to take into consideration U.S. Supply chain security and so on. So I think from an African perspective, there is a little bit of opportunity irrespective of who wins, and I think that this renewed embrace of Africa will continue irrespective of who wins.
Franklin, what is the argument you make to your clients to put their money then into Africa versus potentially cheaper equities in China or in India or elsewhere in the EM world?
Absolutely. It is a unique investment landscape, and I think one of the most unique things about it is that today the private market opportunity is actually much more significant than the public market one. Most African bourses, as you know, are quite illiquid, fairly thin. That's something that's changing over time. That's something that we want to contribute to developing over time. But today, we think the real opportunity is in private markets, in more illiquid investments, and that requires intermediaries such as asset managers, professional management firms like ours, who are mobilizing investor capital to opportunities that require a lot of shaping, a lot of structuring. So there is a little bit more risk and there is a little bit more complexity, but we think that hopefully is balanced by the return opportunity.